Why in Sanatan Dharma we have not just the divine is one, but multiple gurus? They're not always all saying the same thing. It's because that core experience has to be once again reproduced in the consciousness of humanity to keep it alive. This is a truth that Sanatan Dharma understood. So it allowed for the number of gurus who will come and reproduce the same experience and every time says Sohamasmi, though it is the same experience, but it is validated over a period of time and keeps the core alive and flaming in the race. Otherwise, Sanatan Dharma would have suffered the same fate which most religions suffer. They become encrusted in outward formulas and the spirit escapes. Because there is no way, okay, somebody had an experience over a period of time, people even forget what that experience was. And that is most often or not a limited experience. But Sanatan Dharma allows that as new beings will come, new great beings, luminous beings will come, they will reproduce the experience within their consciousness and therefore keep it truly alive in the spirit of the race. At the same time, they will, who knows, they will have a kind of experience which is completely new, many sided splendor of the spirit. So that again allows for a variation and evolution in Sanatana Dharma. That is something wonderful. And that makes it so beautiful, inherently complex, but a complex which is complexity, which is one with the complexity of creation. After all, creation is complex, and we can't reduce it to a very oversimplistic formula. I've been asked to speak on, or rather, I've chosen this aspect of Sanatana Dharma, an evolutionary perspective. And as we proceed, I'll share what exactly is the reason why I've chosen this. Well, every religion has at its core, every religion has a core which can be considered as a soul, and it has a around the soul, which is the core experience of the person or the people who gave birth to the religion, in the sense that there was a master, there was a rishi, as we say, who had an experience, and that experience became the core or the kernel from where the particular religion proceeds. It draws its strength from there. It's where it has to refer back to again and again. Then the next aspect is that there is around the core, around the soul, there develops a body of metaphysics and philosophy, which is like the mind sheath. So, this body of metaphysics and philosophy develops through the different kinds of understandings that people have with regard to that religion. Then, because everything upon earth needs also to be rooted on the physical, and there is a vital sheath in us, so the third element that joins in is a number of cultures, customs, tradition which correspond to the vital sheath. Like in India, we have now Durga Puja is going on. So there is celebration, there is Dashera. So there's the vital sheath which gets permeated and percolated by a particular core truth. And finally, the very physical body. So institutions develop which are meant to embody the soul or the spirit of the religion, and I may add, often too lightly. As Sri Aurobindo says, that many times the institutions become, they pay a lip service, but they do everything which is diametrically opposite to the core truth. And the reason is very simple, that while it is much more easier, the purest experience can be had in our deepest soul. But for any experience, even for an individual human being, to translate it in terms of the physical and vital is very, very difficult. So this is a genuine difficulty. Yet, when we speak about it, we must understand that there are religions which rely too much on the outward aspect, too much on the institutions that have been built around it, or even on the little, traditions and customs. And if that becomes their focus, then over a period of time, the soul can be lost. They forget the origin, what was the original truth of formula. Now, the beauty of Sanatan Dharma is that Sanatan Dharma understood it way back when the first master, the beauty is we don't even know who was the first master, who started this, who had the aha experience, an experience of the divine, and gave certain profound formulas through which we can walk the way. So, the first thing about Sanatan Dharma is that it recognizes that there is no one single individual, however great, who can exhaust all the many sided aspects of the infinite. So, this is what gave birth to later on the great formula of Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. There are many, many approaches, many roads, but this is often considered to mean that there is the same experience towards which everybody go. Well, there is some truth in that, but it is equally true that when different people approach different ways, then unless they go right to the very end, that last point, they will also have different experiences. So, that's why we have the famous old time debates between the bhaktas and the gyanis. So gyanis speak about, they often belittle bhakti, and the bhaktas often belittle gyanis, or people who take the path of karma. So they often belittle the gyani and the bhaktas, and the gyani says karma is only a means and a preparation. So that's because the core experience too, there are many, many stages over which one can stop. And therefore, unless one has the urge to go beyond and beyond, like the Vedic rishis, they did go. They were not satisfied even with the being, the experience of the being. They went still further. What is before the being, beyond the being? And so on, they went right to the very core of things. So, the first aspect we need to understand what is unique about Sanatan Dharma is not only there are many approaches, many sided approach, but it also admits that there are different experiences arising at different levels of our journey. So if we stop halfway through, we are likely to conclude, like, when a seed blossoms into a tree, we are likely to conclude, seeing the trunk, that this is the tree. But if we wait, we'll see the branches. Somebody who goes still further can see the fruits and the flowers. And somebody who goes still further will see that not only fruits and flowers, these fruit drop into the soil as seeds. Involution, that's how Sri Aurobindo brought out. And then it further evolves. So because of this understanding that the divine by his nature is infinite, and that stands even to logic, because if the divine is finite, it should be very easy for anybody to explain how the divine came into being. This is a question that people often ask. But the moment we say it is infinite, then this question ceases to exist. The only way we can understand infinite is by direct experience. But the first aspect is that not only there are many approaches, but there are different stages of self-evolution at which different kinds of experiences arise. So there is a person who worships or rather who speaks about the impersonal. The divine is not this, not that, he's a vast impersonality. Valid. But equally, there is a person who speaks of the divine as the deeply, intensely personal, which is also valid. And there is a person who goes still further and says Sagun and Nirgun unite in that. Equally valid. There is a fourth person who says there is that of which no name can be given, who has no form and yet assumes every form and every name. Equally valid. So it is this inherent beauty of the many-sidedness, not only of the approach, but of the divine himself, that gives rise to, that makes Sanatana Dharma such a vast and Catholic, journey. The second aspect, these many aspects of the divine, because he's infinite, so each aspect becomes a god. So very often people say, oh, so many gods. Well, gods is a help. Why not? I mean, after all, it's a wonderful thing to have so many assistants on the way. So who are the gods? They are aspects of the divine. They come to us to help us on the way. The problem is if we stop with the gods and say that, well, this god is everything, that can be an approach. But essentially, we have to understand they are powers and aspects of the infinite. And through them, we can approach again to the one. This is a valid approach which Sanatana Dharma is accepted. But the third very beautiful thing, often people, I was on one of the forums where discussion was going on, and the person was very happily saying, but my religion has only one guru and one book. So that's so easy. So easy is not necessarily true. So easy is 1 + 1 = 2, but that doesn't mean it is, the only truth in this creation. So we need to understand that why in Sanatana Dharma we have not just the divine is one, but multiple gurus. They're not always all saying the same thing. It's because that core experience has to be once again reproduced in the consciousness of humanity to keep it alive. This is a truth that Sanatana Dharma understood. So it allowed for the number of gurus who will come and reproduce the same experience, and every time says Soham Asmi, though it is the same experience, but it is validated over a period of time and keeps the core alive and flaming in the race. Otherwise, Sanatana Dharma would have suffered the same fate which most religions suffer. They become encrusted in outward formulas and the spirit escapes. Because there is no way, okay, somebody had an experience over a period of time, people even forget what that experience was. And that is most often or not a limited experience. But Sanatan Dharma allows that as new beings will come, new great beings, luminous beings will come, they will reproduce the experience within their consciousness and therefore keep it truly alive in the spirit of the race. At the same time, they will, who knows, they will have a kind of experience which is completely new, many sided splendor of the spirit. So that again allows for a variation and evolution in Sanatana Dharma. That is something wonderful. And that makes it so beautiful, inherently complex, but a complex which is complexity, which is one with the complexity of creation. After all, creation is complex, and we can't reduce it to a very oversimplistic formula. Same with books. So having one book is very nice. It's very easy to tell people. I was other day seeing that some people reduce Gita to a set of 4 formulas, or 1 or 2 formulas. But that's not what it is. It's about every book brings, it's even when it speaks of the same thing, it brings a completely new perspective. And let me give an example. A child comes to the home. So now when a child comes to the home, father has one perspective, mother has another perspective, grandparents have another perspective about the same child, and they all love the child. And as the child grows at different stages, the perspective begins to change. So this aspect of Sanatan Dharma, where the experience is again and again reproduced in the consciousness of the masters, is something so wonderful. And also, not only is it reproduced, there is a possibility of a new experience arising out of the same basic truth or the same basic substance. I mean, ultimate core will be one of the whole creation. But in its unfolding, it takes new forms. Not only that, it seems that the one being infinite, it loves variation. So it even allows for the freedom and plasticity of an individual approach to the divine. So this is the third aspect, which is very beautiful and unique, that each individual, and it's not like one has to follow the 6 systems of philosophy, etc., etc. A person may not know any philosophy, yet may have a thirst. I want to know the divine. After all, very often I ask this question: who gave the mantra to Surdas? What was Surdas doing? He was, helpless without his eyes. And he was just singing out his deepest feelings. Today we call them pad. But was it a method he was following? Or take another example. What was Sabri doing? Sabri was doing none of the traditional practices, but she was carrying this hope that one day Rama will come my way and I must gather every day a set of plums to feed him and clean the place. That was Sabri's yoga. Or what was Ahilya doing? Practically nothing. She was just in a state of jad. Jad pashan means she was in a state of inertia for whatever reason. And in that state, accursed state, fallen state, she was just waiting one day, somebody will come and touch me and redeem me. What were the 2 trees doing, which were waiting for Krishna tied to a oakly to liberate them? What was Kansa and Ravana doing? Opposing God's design, and yet by that act getting liberated. So when we talk about the variety of approaches, we should not limit it to the 6 schools of philosophy or the traditional paths of yoga. As many individuals, as many paths of yoga are there. So this is the third or fourth wonderful thing about Sanatana Dharma. Fifth, which is something so beautiful, unlike traditional religions or the world religions, many of them, you have to believe and live life according to certain principles, which is basically at the vital physical level. We have certain traditions, customs, and if you do that, if you follow that, it could be going on Sundays to a church or gurdwara, a mosque, or for that matter a temple, anywhere. So it is like you follow this ritual and practice, and God will be happy with you, and you will get a post-mortem salvation. Your seat will be reserved by the fact that your attendance is being marked. Now, Sanatana Dharma doesn't stop there. It doesn't refute, it doesn't refute it. It says, okay, if you want to go every Sunday to temple, fine, it's all right. But to believe that that's the end of things, no. So again, so what does it say? It says you can become that because you are that. So that is something, another very beautiful thing, Tattvamasi. So not only Sohamasmi. Sohamasmi is that each individual carries the divine self within himself. But also, Tattvamasi, you are that. So when the Guru says that you are that, nothing else. So it is a reminder that while all this is okay, Sanatana Dharma, the beauty, doesn't enter into either or debate. Either, sometime back when I was in Patiala on a posting. So every morning I used to go, myself and my wife, we would go to a center there and, clean the place, and whatever we loved reading Savitri, sitting there, hanging out, modern language, and doing whatever work came our way, and come back. So a family which was used to share the house, rather it was their house, and we were the tenants. So one day they asked, "Where do you go every morning?" So I said, "This is what we go for." Then the person said he was follower of one religion. He said, ours is very simple. We don't believe in all this, going to a temple and, doing all this, puja and all this. So I smiled and said, yes, but you do go to your place and go to a book. How does it make it different? We understand it. It's perfectly fine. So the beauty of Sanatana Dharma is doesn't refute anything. It doesn't say don't do this. This can be an approach. But at the same time, this is not the end of things. This can be a starting point. That's what we see in the Tantra Pashuvat. Then, as a human being, when you worship, as a godlike being, when you worship. The other day we were having a little chat with a lovely little child about yagya. So they do home at home. So I asked the child, this yagya we do outside, but it has a corresponding element as a human being, that when we do it mechanically, it's pashuvat. You just put the sticks or whatever, and even the mantras are chanted mechanically. When we do it consciously, it's like a human being doing it, knows the meaning, is aware of the thing. And then we can do it like a god. So I asked, what would it mean? What will be the fire that the gods will light? And spontaneously the child said, fire of aspiration. Now, this is something amazing. So you can do this. It's not like you don't have to do it. You can do it. But you must know that that's not the end. It draws its breadth, it draws its significance and meaning from that which is at the core. So the beauty of this Sanatan Dharma, it has always had gurus and masters, as it is said, and always will have gurus and masters who will keep this flame alive, the flame of aspiration within man. Otherwise, it tends to get encrusted into a mass of rituals and customs whose meaning is lost over a period of time, because many customs and traditions are very contextual in a certain, let's say when invasions were going on, then people used to cover their women, especially, they used to cover their head in those parts which were right the border areas. And equally, because there were people who were plundering, there's something called as a guilt complex. So when you plunder and loot and pick up women, so you start believing that your own woman will be treated this way. So they started covering their own women. So it is contextual. It has nothing to do with a barbarian will feel like it. But when world improves, then world conditions change. You have to learn to change. So the beauty of Sanatan Dharma is doesn't hold on to the temporary, it holds on to the permanent and the eternal. It understands that change is a law of life, it's a way of life. But a sixth element which is so beautiful, is that this change is a direction and purpose. So very often when we speak about change, so we posit change vis-a-vis the permanent, the transient and the eternal. This misconception has grown primarily due to certain kind of interpretation, a monistic, illusionistic interpretation of the Vedanta, further reinforced, or rather, since Buddha came earlier, so reinforced with this tendency that there is the world which is ever changing. And because it's ever changing, there is suffering, because we desire for one thing, we get it, and then it is taken away. And then there is the permanent. So seek the permanent. But in the same Sanatan Dharma, there is another line which looks at the change in a very positive way. So it is not just change, it is evolving. And this evolution is at two levels. One is the evolution of the soul. That's why we have the whole idea of rebirth. So before rebirth became a system of papa and punya, which is, I don't want to use terms, but post certain religions which invaded. And, there was a lot of confusion going on. And people thought that perhaps, this is the way to hold on, that, you'll be punished, you'll be rewarded. But if we go back to the ages of the Vedas, the Upanishad and the Gita, there was dharma and adharma. There was not punishment and reward, which is a later mistranslation of that whole thing. There is dharma, which opens the path to evolution. And there is adharma, which stands in the way of evolution. So the only reward was that you grow and you grow fast. The only punishment was you slow down your own growth and go through a great complex meandering than through a direct, straight process. So this is the only difference that we find, dharma and adharma. Subsequently, it became papa and punya, and all this reward and punishment, hell and heaven, all this theory came up. But the direction of this evolution is essentially the blossoming of the soul. So whole rebirth, the cycles of rebirth, which you know is so logical. If there is an immortal soul, as all religions say, then to give it only one term, I can understand. For materialists, there is no rebirth, perfectly fine. But even though for materialists also things are constantly reborn, that is the condition of progress. But okay, there is no individual element. It is understandable that they don't believe in rebirth because they don't believe in soul. Though I'm not going into the argument that, well, that's a fallacious argument. But coming just to the rebirth aspect, why is the rebirth? There are religions which don't speak about rebirth because they are not evolutionary religions. They are finished the moment you are baptized, the moment you accept that I belong to this religion, you are redeemed. Doesn't matter what you do. You may blow up a whole city, you may kill people, but well, you are redeemed just because you belong to you have a surname, you have a name, and you dress up in a certain way, which is one of the most illogical, crass absurdity. I would use the word stupidity that one can believe in, and yet it is believed in. What does Sanatan Dharma say? No, the soul within is like a seed, and it has to grow into its full divine manifestation. That's why we have rebirth. So rebirth is not about reward and punishment. If really it is about reward and punishment, it's very doubtful if any soul will ever reach that point. Because we start by, all kinds of errors born out of ignorance. But it is a constant process of evolution. So the soul keeps learning through experience. It's like a child who starts from kindergarten and reaches the graduation level, makes many mistakes. So these mistakes become a learning process. So it is a constant learning essential and the blossoming of the soul. So this is something very beautiful. Where can it go into this blossoming? Well, one thought is, this is the seventh interesting point. One thought is that, well, it can eventually merge with God. But there's another very interesting aspect which Swami Vivekananda brings out in his Chicago address. He says, because it was a context where he was speaking to people who believe that man is a sinner by birth. Its deeper meaning is something else. The deeper meaning is that when you take material cloak, then you are prone to errors and ignorance, because this cloak is like that. But when it is said you are a sinner, because some great grandsire of yours in a mythical paradise did something he was not supposed to do, probably ate an apple, one of the most innocuous things that one can ever imagine. He was bit by a snake and he fell down. Now, if we, the story has a meaning, I'm not saying the deeper symbol is there. But what it means is that there was a stage of humanity, it was living with innocence, carefree. It was the vital physical stage, just first human being, living by the law of the animal. It doesn't have the sense of sin. It doesn't have the sense of evil. It doesn't have the sense of good or bad. We can still see that early humanity, Tarzan-like. And you don't feel anything bad about it. Tarzan roams about in the wild, just bare-breasted. And when, he falls in love, he does everything, physical, vital, emotional. He doesn't feel bad about it. And it's so beautiful to see him like that. But yet it is an animal state. So as we grow through the sense of good and bad, virtue and vice. But eventually even this must end. Good and bad are not the beginning and end of the world. Good and bad is a passage. And where does it lead to? It leads eventually to the blossoming of the divine nature. So Swami Vivekananda brought it out very beautifully that we are essentially divine, not only in our core, but also in our nature. And this divine nature and the process of rebirth is like chipping off. Our early births are like stone, hard rock. And the gods are laboring to chip it off, little by little, through a passage of time. In one life, if they chip us off, it will be like terrible. So it takes time. They chip us little, till finally out of this stone emerges the beautiful god or the goddess which is concealed within it. So deep within, all of us have a divine nature. But that gets distorted. This is another very beautiful evolutionary perspective. So when we look at things like that, then we understand that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. So within every Ratnakar, the dacoit, there is Valmiki, the great poet. Within every Angulimal, there is Anand. Jagai and Maghai, there is the disciple of Chaitanya. So this is because this divine nature is in everybody. And it needs the grace of the master. It needs a path, a process, aspiration, call it whatever. And we all can realize it. This is something beautiful. But again, since God loves multiplicity, that one divine being, this divine nature doesn't mean everybody becomes, Okay, sir, good morning, madam, and uniformity. That's how we begin to believe. Divine nature means everybody is doing a pious act, everybody is non-violent in the world. No, divine nature doesn't mean that. The divine, if you look at our conceptions of the divine, look at just this is the now Durga going on. Now, there are 9 forms of Durga. Why do we need 9 forms? Why not one form? Each form represents a truth. So you have, today I think it's Kushamanda. So it starts from Shailbala. Then Shailbala is the daughter of the mountains. Within matter, a divine energy is born. Now this divine energy has to be concentrated. So that concentration becomes Brahmacharini. Then Chandraghanta. As a result of this concentration, within the night of material existence, there dawns some kind of a light. And then there is Kushamanda. That light grows, and by its warmth, there will be born further and further aspects of divinity. So when we look at it like this, at once the symbol and the truth behind, then we see that at different stages, human beings represent different aspects of the divine. So to the Kshatriya, it is valid to kill, but for the righteous cause. So when we make an absolute gospel of anything, be it non-violence, then we are actually turning it into a falsehood. Falsehood derives itself from a truth. But by giving it an absolute value, as some religions do, we completely change it into falsehood. There are religions which make a complete gospel of one aspect. But look at Sanatan Dharma. It says, well, you could be a Brahmin sitting and meditating and, trying to realize God. Wonderful. That's the highest state. Or you could be a Kshatriya going to the battle like Bhishma and Arjun. And yet you are pursuing God. Oh, is it so? Oh, well, you could be a businessman transacting with the whole world, with beautiful things, with production, circulation of things, and you are realizing God. Oh, is it? What about the craftsman, the Shudra as it is called? Well, you could be dealing with the most material objects, everyday life, and yet you could realize God. Sadharma Gati. So, this aspect that there are different ways in manifestation. See, one of the biggest problem of the Semitic religions is they don't explain manifestation. Unfortunately, Indian thought in a certain line fell into this trap. And I use the word booby trap. When we can't understand manifestation, and the reason why we cannot understand, I'll share in a moment. So we try to fill it with all kinds of theories. Okay, this is some Kal is running it, not God. The person who runs the show is somebody else. So we try to do that. There is a Satan who is involved in this whole story of manifestation. Or we say, well, it's an illusion, come out of it. Or we use a mysterious term called Leela. Now, Leela is not Maya, but we can't understand it because it's God's Leela. Well, we may not understand it now, but one day manage to grow and understand the Leela. So when we look at this Leela, why we cannot understand manifestation is, unlike the Purusha aspect, this is another beautiful thing about Sanatana Dharma. The dual aspect of the one divine, the passive and dynamic. So while it's easy to understand the Purusha, what is he doing? He's sitting in the chair like most Purushas, even physically in this world. They become couch potatoes. So he's, but of course, Purusha is not couch potato. He is releasing idea forces into this world. He's sitting and watching over the world. His task is to give the ultimate sanction. Is it okay? I'm going for this. Yes, go for it. That's the Purusha. But who is doing all the difficult and dirty job? It is Prakriti. So again, you see, Prakriti is manifold. It's near impossible to understand. That's why the dance of Shakti, who can catch a rhythm except one who is Krishna himself or Shiva? Who can understand the rhythms of Shakti? Even Prakriti falters when she tries to, follow those steps. So this dance of creation, which is such a beautiful gift of Sanatana Dharma. And the beauty is, this connects us with science. That's why I think, is it Stockholm or one of the places where the Nataraj statue is used as, at the entrance of the Atomic Research Institute. Why? Because Nataraj, the dance, swastika, the dance. The other day, WhatsApp was circulating. You keep twisting the Saptarishi Mandal in 4 directions, in 4 ways. As there is the rotation, you have the swastika. What is swastika? The forward movement of time. Understanding time, understanding creation, understanding the movement of the atoms makes Sanatan Dharma one with science. It's not just about many approaches to God. It's about joining the two poles of existence, matter and the divine. This is the secret of Sanatana Dharma. It is not just that souls are born and they have the experience, they will go away eventually to the divine. There is no point in developing if the end is going to be the same. But there is a work here to do, which is there in Sanatana Dharma, not just about a spiritual evolution, but also about a material evolution. And of course, we know that famous story. So people often ask that, well, I was also taught Darwin's theory of evolution. But as I grew up and read the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma, I said, what much more complete theory is already there, and much more complete. I mean it, much more complete, because Darwin observed the things and he gave observation, wrote big books, wonderful. He didn't explain evolution. To explain it, all kinds of theories came in: neo-Darwinism, Lamarck's theory, adaptation. But what really adapts? What really becomes aware that I have to adapt? Where is that will to live, the will to strive, the will to evolve? Nothing is explained or understood. That is taught. But you tell that today that in the universities, why don't you teach the parable of the Dashavatar? No, that is Hindu. That contradicts it. It is science. What really is the parable of Dashavatar? God becomes a fish. Creation is in water. God becomes a tortoise. Land and water. God becomes the Vara, creature mastery over land. God becomes half animal, half human. That's not enough. God becomes the Vamana, the dwarf man, aspiring to conquer heaven, worlds, everything. Why? Because with the Vamana, the soul is born, the psychic essence. So it begins to dream. The Vamana dreams of not just conquest over earth. He's a little tiny being, but yet he conquers the heavens, he conquers the underworlds, he conquers the earth. And then comes Parshuram, the Rajogun Sampanna, power of the Rama of the axe, and then comes Rama, moderates that power of the axe, the Kshatriyatva, and brings within it a luminous intelligence. And then comes Krishna, he says, well, come with me to the eternal dance, I'll take you still further. This is not the end of the journey to be a man amongst animal, it is to be a God among humans. So he takes us still further. Meanwhile, Buddha comes. He says, well, there is something still further, goes beyond. And that's one path he opens for those who want to quit the game. And Sri Aurobindo comes in and says, well, if you want to quit, there are many ways. But let's complete the task of Krishna, which is to have the Vrindavan here, to join in the Ras and take the ecstasy hereafter. This world was born out of delight. This is the great thought that Sanatana Dharma brings in, and we should, pause with that. This world is not born out of desire, as some religion says. This world is not an accident in time, as science says, as a type of science. Not all science says that. I mean, if you read Watson and Crick, famous book on, the genetic code, they say very clearly we can't explain it. It's not an accident. So that's how the theory of panspermia came in. But I'm not getting into that. But some kind of science believes that it's an accident in time. And all these accidents have summed up to man who is beginning to wonder how this accident came into being. That is the funniest of paradox. Or as some believe, that, well, man did a sin and therefore he's being punished, condemned to, earth. The other day, I don't know why this kind of liking people have for this utterly pessimistic philosophy. Very nicely, this song was circulating on WhatsApp. Zindagi se badi koi saza nahi. अरे ऐसी क्या है? जिंदगी से बड़ी कोई रजा नहीं. Life opens doors to evolution. Even saza here is a path. There are people who are given saza, literally Sri Aurobindo, and they turn that saza into a greatest boon and a blessing. This is man. This is given to man. We don't belong to that hopeless, helpless thought where we say it was for some great ancestor, Mr. Adam and Miss Eve, they did something wrong. We don't know exactly. But God was very angry, he punished them. And we have to suffer their punishment. When will the term be over? When you convert yourself to a certain belief. And what is surprising to me, truly surprising, that so-called logical, rational thinkers, half the world believes in such nonsense. I mean, it's really, really amazing. What does Indian thought say? It says the world is a manifestation of delight. Look around the world. Tell people, bad karma, you will suffer in hell. You know what they will say? They will turn back and say, don't tell me all the stories, let me enjoy life. This delight is so deeply ingrained in existence. It is there. Any amount of fear of punishment does not prevent people from still snatching their pound of pleasure. Sri Aurobindo speaks of this in Savitri. Bliss is at the secret root of things. This, even you tell them, if you do this, you will be punished. Look at all this now. Legally, we are debating all this, that what really helps. You punish people, fine. Still, for that moment. So, because delight, of course, it's a degraded delight, but there is a joy in just being. Often people go and speak about Maya, this world is chalna, this world is this, that, old wives' tale. Sorry to put it like that. So I asked them, so when are you booking a ticket for yourself for Nirvana, nearest bus to Nirvana? No, why are you saying you want us to die? No, you say it's all chalna and all this nonsense. Why are you living in this world? But that's the paradox that we live in. And that's the paradox which many religions thought leave us with. This world is an impossible paradox where either we choose this or that, but man wants both. Why? Because he's meant to link both. And that's why Sri Aurobindo gives us the beautiful answer. This world is a paradox with God for key. So God is not only beyond, he's here too, ever. He's not just neti neti, he's also iti iti. He's in each atom of existence. What is he doing here? What's his business? He is revealing himself. To some, he reveals in a block of matter as, to Hiranyakashipu, he reveals himself as nursing. To somebody else in the same block of matter, he reveals as the Redeemer Rama, liberating Ahilya. To somebody else in a block of matter, he reveals himself as Shivlingam. And to somebody else, which is the avatar of the future, that is Sri Aurobindo, he reveals in matter the possibility of a complete divinization of life. It's the same matter, same stone. But look at the beauty of this manifestation, how it is evolving from primitive forms to more and more complex forms. And where are they going? From living matter, from so-called inanimate matter. I'm not going into the details of involution and evolution, but people can read it from Sri Aurobindo, and there are plenty of talks on that. Unconscious matter brings out consciousness, half consciousness, a problem with which the modern neuroscientists are grappling with. Is consciousness the result of brain cells? How come? Unconscious brain cells bringing out consciousness? Well, because it is hidden as a possibility inside. Is lightning the result of the wires that we connect? It is hidden as a possibility in the clouds. Therefore, there is light. Try to catch it, you can light up the whole house. So this is what we have to understand, that these things, possibilities are hidden in matter. It becomes living matter. It becomes mentalized thinking matter. And it will still go further and become spiritual matter and divinized matter. So this entire spectrum is all encompassed in one vast something. Can't call it philosophy or metaphysics. I would only use the word infinite unfolding of the infinite. And that unfolding is the dharma. And the term which has been used by the great seers, very significant, is Sanatan Dharma. Why? Because it accepts, accommodates, and assimilates any amount of change. It's not only Sanatan because it's eternal, yes, but also because it accommodates all the changes. That's why the Sanatan Dharma cannot die. It's a fact. The other day, history was being taught to a person, and I asked, oh, so what did you learn in history? And I asked, did you notice something interesting about India? What was it? I said, you know what? Indian civilization refuses to die. It's such a simple, plain fact. So many have come, gone, attacks, Greeks, Egypt, Rome, Mayan, Atlantis, name it, gone. Even the existing religions, they are as good as dead. But look at Sanatan Dharma. Why? Because it's ever evolving, ever fresh, ever creative, like the impulsion of the divine himself. Sanatan Dharma accepts that this world is a creative upsurge of the divine in delight. Therefore, it is going to continue its creativity. Divine cannot make a full stop to his creativity. And He who has pulled out of the darkness and inconscience and unconsciousness, thinking man, that same Sanatan truth will, Dharma will pull us beyond man to the superhumanity of tomorrow. Thank you. Namaste.
We talk about consciousness and energy in matter. So that brings me to the belief that sacred geometry, symbols, we spoke about swastik and other sacred symbols must have their own energy.
Yes.
So that means that Beauvais scale, that incident of that French person who who evaluated the energy of the swastik versus the Nazi symbol, which was a tilted swastik in black color, which has death energy actually.
Yes, Hitler's.
Hitler's, he judged that 16,500 on the Beauvais scale is the energy of a human being, a living human being. And a swastik has an energy of 1 million, while that tilted swastik of Nazi, of Hitler, in black color has such a negative, it's like close to death, it's almost 1,000. It brings you near death. And so that means that these sacred symbols, on one hand, they have energy, but on the other hand, distorting them or making them wrong could also have very negative effect.
Yes, very beautiful.
So what is the role of symbols, yantras, sacred symbols in the practice?
So this is symbol, yantra, tantra, yantra and puja. It came out of the understanding the energy. That's where the tantra steps in. So one is Vedanta, which only speaks about primarily the supreme there. Later on, in Vedas, you have both. You have the Vedanta and the Tantra. This is very clear. But subsequently, the division started, and not going into detail. But if we have to understand the creation, if we don't have to understand creation, just go back, which is also one of the paths, many paths. So one of the paths. In that case, we don't have to understand creation much, except that much, which will help us to come out. This one approach. So, but if we have to understand creation, so that's why in Buddhism, you have Hinayana and Mahayana. Same thing. So if you have to understand creation, then Tantra comes in. Then you have yantra, mantra. We understand this world through sound symbols, through geometry, through mathematics, through algebra, pi, value of pi, every which way, through language, linguistics, you can understand creation. That's how, you have not only the mantra, you have the origin to the, Shivji's Damru. One way it brought out Sanskrit, another way it brought out Tamil language. So we can understand everything going back to the roots as a manifestation of the divine. So Tantra captures it, and it's not limited only to the geometry. Geometry is one way to look at it. It is also in mathematics. For instance, just the numbers, how an Indian would understand the numbers. So what is one? Everything starts 0 and 1. It's a play of 0 and 1. Today we talk about it in computers. 0 is that 1 concealing itself. And 1 is the first thing that comes out of that 0. Together, they complete. Now put 1 after 0 or 2 after 0, then it is only 1 or 2. Put 1 before the 0, its value changes. So we can understand an entire yoga through this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, then it becomes 2, then 3 are the triple planes through which he manifests, Satchidananda, 4, that element which links, and 5, the fifth plane of Ananda, and 6 is consciousness, and 7 are the 7 planes, sevenfold 7. Like that, you can understand everything. So Indian thought, Sanatan Dharma has explored every which way. So symbols are there, and every symbol, like mountain. Mountain is a symbol of, matter aspiring towards the heights. What is a tree? It's a symbol of life, variety, manifold, rooted in earth and yet going toward the heaven, drawing itself from the sun. What is river? It's a symbol again of life flowing through towards its source. So we can understand all the symbols, but now the problem is that if we get lost only in the symbol and not understand the principle behind it, then we, miss a point. Then it becomes only a kind of tradition. So as I said, Pashuvat sadhana. It's acceptable in Tantra, but one should do it more consciously. Like we use the word cow. So cow is sacred, yes, but it comes from the root light. And one way to understand is that go, and of course, cow is a very developed being. Leaving aside cow, no developed being in Indian thought was, killing a horse or an elephant or a cow. None of this was considered good, simply because a developed being has a little more developed psychic spark. So it had a logic behind it. But it's not just about the physical cow. We must save not only cow, but elephants, horses. They are not threatened so much though. Dogs. So, the entire thing comes from there. Cats, all these creatures, which are, developed like mammals, already something starts. But also because this is, we should understand that cow is light. It must be safeguarded. It's important. If we allow light in our thoughts to be invaded by darkness, then what are we doing? We are killing the cow, but in another way we are killing. But when we nourish the cow, nurture it through the right food, through, then it will give us milk. What is milk? Milk is knowledge. So we have Shir Shagar. So the symbol and the real, they go together. But for the common humanity, because it's very difficult to leap to the real, man needs something very concrete. That's why we have the images, etc., because they help us to enter into the reality. So symbols are necessary, they must be there. But also, as you said, bhang murti ki puja nahi ki jati. If you break an idol, you don't worship it. Why? Because it becomes a play of distorted forces. So when we understand a symbol is only a tool, yantra also equally, which is being used by forces. So everything is a tool. The body is a tool. Now, if we have the yantra right, like for instance, let's take the body as a tool. If you keep the body in a good condition, healthy condition, you do, eat the right kind of food, give it good sleep, this body will become a beautiful tool. But if you use it for dark kinds of activities, then this body becomes a tool for the asuric forces. Same thing applies to everything, including the swastik, the Om. Some people have used this, since you are at it, swastik, but there is another symbol which goes unnoticed, is the symbol Om. And people often say, see, Om is there in every religion. Please take a hard look and see whether it's Om as it is or Om which is twisted and turned. It's just a thought. So Om in its origin is one thing, but when you twist and turn Om, you are playing with something which is in its origin is meant to represent. It's an akshara. That's how it is, Omkar. And that akshara, you can't put it, upside down or this way and say it's the same akshara. It loses its sense. It's a different thing. Nobody studies that. In swastika, they have studied because it will not be, refuted. But there are so many symbols in religions, which I would say today that they are dark symbols, but they are accepted in certain religions. And it's worth knowing these things, because otherwise we get caught into a web of forces which are very dark and not conducive. Often I have seen many religions and, get into the darkest terror on mankind. And that's because their places have become hubs of dark energies. You accept it and enter it and you are caught in it. And people don't understand. They think it's just brainwashing. It's worse. It's brain capturing, brain possessing by forces that are beyond human reckoning. And you can't deal with it the way we were trying to deal with Hitler. You are a nice guy. We are non-violent people. Be very happy. Come to our houses, please. But we'll not accept your philosophy. You have to understand what it stands for and deal with it the way each thing has to be dealt with. So that aspect is in Sanatan Dharma, there is a way of each thing. Rith is rhythm, everything. Snake is God. But if you want to take a snake and put it around your neck, be sure you are Shiva or Narayana. If you are otherwise, if you are Narayana, a snake will say, be on, lie on me as a couch. And if you are Shiva, you can put the snake around and his wish, Shiva has already taken. But if you are none of these, don't mess with a snake. Keep it an arm's distance or make sure it doesn't come harm other creatures. No, he has a place in the totality of things. That's a different matter. Yes. Insects in creation. Mosquitoes and insects. Mother says they are a projection of the vital world. Why speak about symbols? They are symbols of vital worlds. And Sri Ramakrishna did it in a different way. He showed it. When a disciple came and said, sir, is it okay to kill mosquitoes? He had this question. When he entered, Sri Ramakrishna was clapping and killing the mosquitoes to give a message. He had a unique way. So many times, a lot of truths get misapplied because we don't know these little details. Very true.
But I was recently going through the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and there was a conversation between the great wise Yagyavalkya and his wife Maitri, and he says that the Atma is Anand Swarup, And we don't love our children because we love them. We love them because we love ourselves. So even though being so wise and learned in the Veds and the Upanishads, he sets out on a journey, giving up everything to achieve Anand, Satchit Anand. So I just wanted to know that why is that? And
Okay,
if you
okay. Wonderful. But first thing first, questions are never a lay question or not. Answers can be. Okay, so questions are always valid and good. And this is not just good, but a very good question. So Yagnavalk, just to touch upon it, he sets on a journey, as you have rightly said, and he wants to explore further. So, in Indian thought, I touched upon Chaturvanya. You also have the fourfold stages of life. So Yagnavalk is not running away from life. He has lived a life. He has lived a life in a thriving ashram. He has lived a life in, with disciples. And there's a famous story of Yagnavalk, asking Janak to give 1,000 cows horns tipped with gold, because he says, I need it for running the show. So for the ashram. So Yagnavalk has lived a life, and there comes a time when a person who has, there's a line in Savitri, after we have served the great divided world, God's bliss and oneness are our inborn right. So it's perfectly fine for somebody who has lived a life and given what he had to do, give to the world such beautiful things like the Isha Upanishad. He has the right to say, look, now I want to plunge myself completely in the one divine. This is he's not running away or escaping. But even there, he gives a choice. So that comes the story. He asks his two wives, Katyayani and Maitreyi. So he tells them that, well, I have this much property and I share it between the two of you equally. Very good, like, any sensible person would do. So Katyayani is happy. She is happy to serve him, and she accepts that whatever he decides. But Maitreyi says, property and all my life I have heard you speak about eternal, about truth, about Ishavasyamidam Sarvam. You tell me, why does one after all love children and wife, and you give me that knowledge which you have? I don't have that knowledge. I want that knowledge and not just this money. So then this dialogue, then it starts. So he says, Maitreyi, I am very fond of you because you have asked me the right question. And then he says that, one loves the wife not for the sake of the wife, but for the sake of the self, and so on and so forth, right up to nation and humanity. And that will explain why he seeks to withdraw. Not withdraw, but take the final plunge. Now, this answer, like many of these answers, has a double sense within it. Sri Aurobindo actually explains it. In English, it's very easy to understand. Because we have the sense of Atma now only with Swa, only with the deepest self. But Swa and Atma can also mean, myself. So that's how it is. So as is the self, so is our love with children and parents and wife and husband and world. So basically, within this little answer is given to us the key of relationship with the world. If our self is the lowest self, animal self, Mother said very beautifully when she was asked about love and, animal love and human love, etc. She says, it is childishly simple. If you have the consciousness of an animal, your love is like an animal. If you have a consciousness of a human being, your love is like a human being. If you have the consciousness of a God, your love is like a God. Now, this is where the key lies. As is our self, so is our relationship. So if we want to improve our relationship, we must upgrade the self. There is no other way. I love the wife not for the sake of the wife, but for the sake of the self. If my self is egoistic, then my love will be egoistic. Merely to, try, he is a good person, bad person, trying to change by modern psychology, you will end up changing behavior. That's what has happened today, that outwardly people have learned how to say hello, good morning, thank you. But inwardly they harbor everything that is wicked and vile. So that's not the way. Upgrade the self. Upgrade the self so that your relationship changes. And to what extent it can go? It can go to that extent, Isha Sarva Bhutanam. So he wants to now take that highest plunge, that I want to relate. He doesn't want to leave this world. He says, I want to relate with this entire creation, including you, Maitreyi. She wants to come along, and he doesn't say, don't come along. You come along, but let me connect with the highest so that I can connect with you and with everybody on the basis of the highest. And we have that example of Sri Aurobindo. People often speak that if we drew into a room, Sri Aurobindo watched over the entire world. He was answering to all the disciples. He had the most intimate relationship with some of those disciples who were very close to him. And of course, we know about Mother, with whom, the mother said that without him, I exist not, and without me, he is unmanifest. So we must continue to strive to make ourselves, in a general sense, discover the greater and greater. Now, when we discover that the Atma is Ananda Swarup, completely merge with it, then what happens with this world? Then this entire world becomes a Ras Leela of the Anandamay. Until then, we'll always have something which will, a little line in that perfection that we are striving for. So that's what Yajnavalkya wants now. It is the final project he has undertaken. And Maitreyi could accompany him. I do not know. Their Shruti is mute on whether she accompanied or not. This is a question I have tried to find actually the answer to, but I have not found in the story. But I presume she must have accompanied. But let him and her, both of them would have striven for the highest. And then come back as Anandamay. As who is Anandamay? Krishna. He is how he connects with the entire world, in entire creation. So that's why Yajnavalkya needs a time, not as a final departure, but to withdraw and discover that ultimate Ananda, not only within his soul, but within this entire creation. So that's how we have to understand it. But we should not forget that he went through the steps and stages. So if we just try to, it's very dangerous to copy a wise man. Words we can copy. But if we try to live according to what he has lived outwardly, inner state, yes, then it's a very dangerous thing to do. So, Yajnavalkya's, that teaching is enough for us to live by Ishavasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. That's where the key is given. Tena tyaktena bhunjita. By renouncing everything, you enjoy all things. Magrida kasya siddhana. So when I discover that delight, then all things are a joyous expression of the one delightful one.